Hello, our topic in this video is an interview of Vladimir Putin by political commentator Tucker Carlson. This interview is on February 6, 2024. Why am I going to discuss this particular interview? The reason is I want to use that particular event to learn how we use cosmic cybernetics to make decisions. That's the number one purpose of cosmic cybernetics. It helps us make decisions. It helps us make the decisions by understanding the dynamics, the motivations, the interests and inclinations of people. By understanding that, we can see what the momentum and purpose is of any event or behavior. And we're going to make some predictions about consequences of that interview that are different from what I'm reading by the political experts right now. So we're going to accomplish three basic things. We're going to learn how cosmic cybernetics is used for making decisions. We're going to learn some specific techniques in interpretation that are used in cosmic cybernetics. And we will make some more specific predictions. I say more because I've already made 13, 14, something like that, videos on the Ukraine war with very specific predictions. And the accuracy of those predictions is stunning. Unbelievable how we make specific predictions. I'm going to make some more predictions, and that will help us assess how well cosmic cybernetics is doing in helping us understand what's going on and see where things are headed. So here's the prediction. The prediction is that that interview is going to have a big impact on the whole momentum of the war. I think that that interview is powerful. It's almost a turning point. It's representative of a turning point in the Ukraine war that's going on now. Right now, what I've read about that interview, I live in the United States, so these are sources of news and comments from commentators in the United States. And what I've read is that the interview was kind of boring. It was full of propaganda from Putin. It went on and on and on. And it didn't go the way Tucker Carlson wanted it to. It was basically almost a monologue by Putin. He wasn't able to challenge things. And so kind of ho-hum, just some more Russian propaganda. The video was 1 week ago. Today is, February 13, 2024. It's 1 week later. This is the feeling about it. By understanding these cosmic cybernetic forces that are going on, I'm predicting that a few years from now, people will look back at this interview as very powerful and having you could say it's having a major effect on the whole momentum of the war. Like one little interview, how could it have that much impact? Another way to look at it is that it's symbolic of a change that's going on right now. So again, we're getting specific ideas that years from now, people will look back at this interview as being very important and representing a turning point in the war. That's not what I've seen so far about the interviews. It's like everybody will just forget it in a few weeks. It doesn't seem that important. I'm not a political expert. I haven't read everything out there. There's probably other commentators with other ideas. But that is at least one predominant feeling in the United States. Now, to understand what we're going to conclude, let me make 2 points about how we analyze things using cosmic cybernetics. Number one, our assumption, our theoretical framework, our concept here is that there's a fractal resonance between patterns in the cosmos and patterns in our lives. So certain things go on in the patterns within the solar system, and they create a kind of resonance with the patterns of our lives. It sounds unbelievable, sounds, might sound like pseudoscience, whatever, it's not pseudoscience. Read the book I wrote, The Astrology of Bipolar Disorder, A Scientific Breakthrough. After you read the book, tell me if you still think it's a pseudoscience. No, we have solid data for this. So that's one idea. There's a fractal resonance between patterns in the cosmos and patterns in our lives. Point number two, when we align our motivations and intentions with those cosmic patterns, there's already a resonance going on, regardless of what we do. But when our intentions, our goals, our purpose is really aligned, synced up very clearly with those patterns, we achieve more. We get more done. But caveat, for better or worse, a lot happens. Whether what happens is good or not, we have to decide. But there's more power, there's more effectiveness when goals are aligned with those patterns. And to jump ahead to what main point that we're going to make here, is that in that interview, Vladimir Putin spoke what is essential about the war from his point of view. He got his message out, clear, direct, and powerful to the Western world, which had not been done before. And the reason that I conclude this is that 1 week after the war began in 2022, almost 2 years ago, what was it, February 24th, 2022, I believe, I made a video 1 week after the war began, and I described in detail and in many videos following that what Putin's goals are, what his purpose is, what his attitude is, and what's really going on in the war. It contradicted almost everything that I read about the war and what the political commentators are saying. And over time, the ideas that I laid out almost 2 years ago after the war began are beginning to be understood. And now they're public. Now they've been stated clearly and unequivocally by Vladimir Putin. So those people who say that that was just propaganda, what does the word propaganda to me mean? To me, it means a bunch of made-up stories, like lies or exaggerations, to manipulate things to get what you want. So was Putin involved in propaganda in that interview? What I'm saying is absolutely not. In fact, Tucker Carlson says in the introduction to that interview, and I'll put a link to a recording of that interview, in the description of this video, so you can get to it if you want to jump over and watch it. But you can watch the beginning of it, and Tucker Carlson says he sees Putin as sincere. And he's right. Why am I so sure he's right? Because exactly what we understood by analyzing the cosmic cybernetic patterns at the beginning of the war is exactly, almost verbatim, what Putin says the war is about. Yes, that's what it's about. Because he's aligned, the message is getting out about what's going on, it's going to have a big impact. Again, I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm not taking sides of anyone, I'm just describing the energetic patterns. So, what did I say 2 years ago when I analyzed these cosmic patterns and resonances going on when the war began and set an imprint for the motivation of the war, reveals what's behind this war? What I said, and you can go back to those videos, I'll put links, I'll put links to the first one and a few others, again, in the description if you want to go back to them. But what I said is that the motivation for the war stunned me. It shocked me. It was not what I was expecting. I suspected that Putin was an evil, freedom-hating psychopath, waging a war with little or no provocation. I'm not an expert in politics. You might think that's naive. You might think it's silly. You might agree. Whatever you think, I'm just a guy. I'm not a big political person studying every little thing going on. I'm influenced by the media of the country I'm in. So anyway, that's what I thought. When I looked at what was going on, I said, oh my God, I'm completely wrong. I'm wrong. Because the Cosmic Cybernetics analysis, I have more confidence in it than I have in whatever assumptions that I have. I said, oh my God, it appears that I'm wrong. Because this is what I realized. And you can go back to those videos and watch it. And this is what came up in the interview. So when the expression of people, the communication of people align sincerely and directly with what we see in this higher fractal order of the patterns in our lives, That power comes through very strong. Therefore, the interview in the long run is going to have a huge impact. So what I said is that the war would go on and on and on, and Putin would persevere and never give up. Shortly after the war began, Russia had moved into the northwest part of Ukraine. The Ukrainian soldiers valiantly forced Russia out very rapidly, just boom, pushed them right back. There was great optimism and cheering here in the United States. Yay, Ukraine, push the bad guys out. But I'm looking at these patterns, I'm saying, well, that's not what it says. That must be a short-term thing. This is going to be a long, hard, drawn-out war. It's like another one of these Vietnam War kinds of things. It's just going to be hard to change. 2 years later, where are we? Reaching a stalemate. A lot of optimism gone. Point number 2, Putin has his own well thought out and detailed understanding of the causes of the war that are very different from the views of the West. Oh my God. Watch the interview. Putin goes on for a half hour at the beginning of the interview, almost nonstop, going through the history of the Ukraine. In 1624, this happened, and the Minsk Accord, and the 20th century, etc. It goes on and on and on. All these details in a way that's very different from the views of the West. And I said that he thinks he's protecting the Ukraine from the West. When I saw that, I was like, this is weird. How can he think this invasion of a country is protecting? He's the one invading. Watch the interview. Watch what some other people are saying now about the war. They're saying the kinds of things. This is now getting out there, and it's changing the momentum of the war, because what's going to happen is that people in countries that are not strongly aligned with Russia, and they're not strongly aligned with NATO and the United States, they're kind of in between somewhere. This is going to have them leaning away from NATO. I don't know if it's making them lean towards Russia, not like Russia is such a good guy here, but clearly to them, Putin is exposing that NATO and the United States are not the pure good guys here. It's not that simple. And so the support that Ukraine needs to win is going to be weakened, and the stature of people supporting the war is going to be weakened on an international scale. This is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is that we are now at a point where the Ukraine can no longer win the war. It's virtually impossible at this point. Basically, we're heading into a stalemate at best, and a stalemate will be seen as a victory for Russia. I'll talk more about that later. So, Tucker Carlson's interview of Putin goes on for over 2 hours. Not making big headlines or big waves, as far as I can tell. A lot of skepticism about, it's boring, Putin just going on and on with his propaganda monologue. Oh, you're wrong. You might wish that's what's happening, but this video a year from now will continue to be getting views. The videos I'm talking about the video recordings of that interview. It's going to have a long-lasting impact, and it's gradually going to push people away from support for NATO and the United States. Now, is that because that's what I think, that's what I believe? If you've been watching my videos, you know I don't do that. I'm just telling you what is going to happen. I think I'm at 98 or 99% accuracy with these things. We'll see a year or two from now if this ends up being true. Another thing I said is that Putin loves the Ukraine. It's like a beautiful gem in Mother Russia. And you can feel that in the interview as well. So, what did Putin say in that interview? Some of the things that came up is that Ukraine is Russian in character, Putin tells the story of when he traveled to the western part of Ukraine. I think that was in the 1980s, if I remember right, maybe 1990s. I think it was the 80s. He was just traveling out there, and he was in places that kind of surprised him. He didn't see any Ukrainian language. He only saw the Russian language and Hungarian, because it's close to Hungary. And people dressed in the Hungarian style. So this is not that long ago. He's emphasizing that this idea that you have Ukraine as a separate entity, he's making the argument that this is part of Russia. It's part of that whole culture and way of life, which is what I said at the very beginning. Now it's coming out loud and clear from Putin himself. It'll have a lot of power because he is being sincere. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe he's delusional. You can decide for yourself. Maybe he's right. Whatever you want to think. But this is what he's experiencing. And if you're going to win a war, you're going to succeed in anything, you need to know what's happening. This is what he honestly thinks. He's telling you, just listen. And the war in Ukraine is, what Putin thinks is the war in Ukraine is a result of the West breaking an agreement to not expand NATO, and the U.S. supported a coup of the Ukrainian government. That's a strong claim. So the things that I said 2 years ago are even more extreme than what I said. He's going so far as to say the United States is involved in pushing out the elected government, in manipulating things. So these are strong claims about how the West, NATO in particular, and the United States in particular, coming in, trying to influence and trying to get Ukraine. And he discussed how agreements were broken where the West agreed not to expand NATO and did anyway. All I'm saying is that this is what I said 2 years ago with no understanding of the history and dynamics, just looking at these cosmic cybernetic patterns. And so, as I said, he talked for over a half hour at the beginning on detailed history of the Ukraine. Tucker Carlson asked twice. He asks Tucker Carlson twice when Tucker asks him questions if he really wants a serious discussion and serious explanation or just talk show points. It's exactly what I described 2 years ago. That this 21 vibe, I might have this on my next slide, no, a little bit later. I talk about the configurations that I saw. This 21 vibration at the start of the war shows this tenacity, this depth, this self-reliance, this interest in the ancient heritage, and how it's very detailed, very specialized, and very much its own way of thinking. It's exactly what Putin demonstrated. Okay, so I already talked about that first paragraph. What's going to happen is that people who are in countries not strongly aligned with the U.S. and NATO, or not strongly aligned with Russia, they're more neutral. The skepticism of NATO and the United States is going to go up. That interview is going to have an effect in bringing people closer to the view of Putin, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not. We'll have to wait a year or two. Come back in 2025, 2026. Let's see where the war is at. The Ukraine will not win. And a stalemate favors Putin because he claims he's not interested in taking over other countries. He's not invading anything. This is not a stepping stone. So the fact that he will not build upon this is exactly what he said. So keeping Ukraine out of NATO, if that can be done, or if Ukraine becomes part of NATO and there's worldwide protests and it weakens NATO's position, either of those results, either Ukraine not becoming part of the Western world as much as Zelensky would like it to, and other people, or embracing more of the Western culture and getting a negative response for that. Decreased support, decreased cooperation, decreased partnerships internationally. One of those two will happen. So even if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, it won't work out well. Why? Because this 21 vibe that's so strong at the beginning of the war is now resounding clearly and loudly. And people are going to resonate with it, and many people will agree with it, whether it's right or wrong. Okay. All right, so I just explained all that. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you some slides quickly of what I said 2 years ago, just to document this. And also to learn a little bit of the astrology. What was happening at the time of the invasion of Ukraine, there was a strong Neptune, Venus, Mars pattern, and Neptune at the Venus, Mars midpoint. A lot of 9 vibration involved with this. And it means a romantic quality from his times in these places. So Ukraine represents something beautiful, elegant, romantic in the mind of Putin and his supporters. So we can stereotype Putin as this is what I said 2 years ago. We can stereotype Putin as a tough KGB fellow without the love of fine art and passion of, for example, a stereotypical image of the Italians, you could say the French, the beautiful, refined architecture and cathedrals and palaces in Europe, the high culture. We can think of him as more like a KGB thug sort of person. But these one-dimensional caricatures overlook the complexity. And Putin is able to express that and get that message across. He does not come across as like a thug or, you get the point. Who Putin is now radiating out. This part of who he is. His heart surrounds Ukraine. There's a strong heart connection to the Ukraine. And here I give some history of things I found out about. And I've got in bold highlight at the bottom, the breakup of the Soviet Union broke Putin's heart. He mentions his misery over this many times. Now I understand and appreciate it. So there's a sentimental connection with the Ukraine. Okay, and here I show some of the other configurations with, here's the 21 vibe, Sun, Saturn, Neptune. This is a very critically important energetic pattern at the time the war began. And what it tells me in bold and highlighted at the bottom, from an American point of view, it may be difficult to imagine that Putin sees the West as violating the deep spiritual depth of Russia and all that Russia has worked hard to achieve, but that is the case. The West is shallow and out of touch with what is really important from Putin's point of view. These are all things that are coming out loud and clear from the interview. It means Putin's going to get more support for his way of thinking. 21 vibration is very prone to develop its own worldview that is not in touch with the view of other people. Well, that's very clear. I mean, he's got his own understanding of the history and what went on that's very different from the narrative you get from the American commentators. Putin is an example of the seemingly inconsistent combination of traits, and unfortunately it's not extremely uncommon. What I'm saying here is, even if you think Putin is an evil psychopath or whatever, that can be true while simultaneously having a kind of sincerity, depth, and well thought out sense of what's going on. I'm not saying he's right, but he certainly knows his history. You listen to that. His understanding of the history, I mean, historians can debate it. I'm just saying it's, you might say, scholarly, or it's carefully analyzed. That's what 21 vibration does. 21 vibe goes very deep within its own focused, specialized areas of interest with an ease and grace that others feel clumsy at. Great profound works can develop, and also conspiracy theorists and even murderers develop their own peculiar worldview. This is what Putin demonstrated in that interview. He's got his own particular worldview. Very specialized interest. Profound works can develop, as well as conspiracy theories. Even people that commit murder because they get these weird conspiracy ideas or whatever. Deep immersion in a topic. And Putin demonstrated that in his interest in history and what's going on. So, conclusion, Tucker Carlson's interview of Putin over time will increase support for Russia and decrease support for the allies of the Ukraine. And this increased support for Russia, and especially the decreased support for the allies of the Ukraine. That's going to be even more obvious. The decreased support for the United States and NATO and the Ukraine. That will be evident over the coming year on an international scale from the countries that are not currently strongly pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia. I mean, if you're pro-Ukraine and that's clear to you, and you're probably never going to change. Same thing if you're pro-Russia. But there are a great many people not that clearly decided. And they will become more anti-NATO over the next year or two. And it's going to prevent a Ukraine victory. And again, even if Ukraine joins NATO, and you might say, oh, look, there's the victory. Wait till you see the consequences of that are not going to be so good. Is it going to bring the peace and strength and freedom that NATO is motivated for, has a mission for? No, it won't. Because it's not done the right way, if that's what happens. It won't, not right in the sense it's not consistent with the energetic patterns that are fighting against it. So it's like if you have a tsunami coming and this huge ocean wave is coming, you want to stop it, but you're not going to stop it with holding up a couple pieces of wood or something. You have to counteract that with something that's going to be effective. And what the West is doing is not effective against this. And so here's a prediction for 2024, seeing into the coming year, because I'm making this video in about mid-February, February 13, 2024. So over the coming year, here are three graphs. One is the green graph. This is where anti-Western sentiment increases. It was during this huge peak here in the autumn, roughly the autumn of 2022, that I predicted Russia would annex East Ukraine. This would be a big positive time for Russia, right in the middle of this thing. Perfectly timed. Here's another, whenever the green is high, whether you like it or not, is times that are favorable for Russia. So I predicted, predicting support at these particular times. And the red is when 11 vibe is strong, which favors the freedom and independence of the West. So these are pro-Western times. Support for Ukraine is high during these times. Whether we like it or not, that's what happens. When you look over this graph overall, are we seeing some nice, large and long, tall and long red things? No, I'm seeing a lot of sudden spikes. What about the green? This is from the start of the war, February 24th, 2022. Right now we're in February 2024, so we're over here where I've got these black statements of support for Russia, a major conflict, and these lines. So this right 1/4 or 1/3 is the future. And what do we see on the right? We see 1, 2, 3, 4 green peaks. We see 1, 2, 3, maybe a fourth real thin, but they look a little thinner, but pretty high. Red peaks, it's pretty much a draw. There's no huge momentum in anyone's favor, maybe slightly more for Putin. Over here, we see the green pretty high consistently. Ukraine can't win. The momentum is not with them. The change that happened with the interview. This is a point I want to make. Cosmic Cybernetics is not a crystal ball where you can just look at it and like magically, boom, tell people what's going on in the world. It tells you what the dynamics are, what the motivations are, what the talents are, what the potential problems are, what the intentions are. Then you have to see how that's playing out. Depending on how it plays out, we can see what will happen. Because the astrology is not an as above, so below mirroring. It's a description of energetic patterns that are reinforced at a very deep level. And eventually those higher fractal levels of the energetic patterns, in the end, they will win. They're stronger. It's like we are in an ocean of energy, and the whole energetic field has more power than any one of us has. And it sets an intention that you might say is more universal and needs to be fulfilled. But people are fulfilling these intentions with all kinds of conflict and not necessarily achieving good results with it. So, looking at this, we see that Ukraine essentially loses the war. It can become a stalemate. A stalemate will be interpreted by historians as a victory for Russia, because Russia's saying, oh, we'll compromise, not compromise, we'll negotiate, we'll come to the table, we're not trying to take over other land, we're just trying to push you guys out and preserve our culture. And Zelensky has said numerous times, not leaving until they get all of eastern Ukraine back and get Crimea back, which fell into Russian hands some time ago. That's not going to happen. That's basically where we're at. So if you're a subscriber, members, I appreciate this. That's my last slide. So if you're a member, we have the benefit for being a member is a 1 hour meeting every Tuesday. Not every Tuesday, sorry. First Tuesday of each month, once a month, a 1 hour meeting. And then there's a platinum level where we also meet on the third Tuesday of each month for an hour and a half. So you get those recordings if you can't come to them. Gives you a way to personally interact, ask questions, discuss things that are interesting to you. All the videos, are about 700 now, are all totally free. But for that personal interaction, there's a membership. And I have on this screen, on this slide here, 3 ways to become a member. You can pause this, read this, and become a member if you're not. If you're not a member or not interested in being a member, I really appreciate subscribers as well. It's a tremendous boost and help to us. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.